So I will talk a bit about something different. We mentioned it's called Reason. It has not much to do with Angular, even though you can use it in Angular, don't worry. But if we don't get absolutely anything what I will be talking about, don't worry too much. I will just get into the overview concepts. I will not go into too much detail about the functional programming stuff and so on. But feel free to ping me on whatever support. There's my Twitter if you want to ping me on Twitter. So hi guys, I'm Sven Sauleau. I'm a French software engineer working as a freelancer. And I'm actually one of the guys behind Babel. I have a few stickers if you want some. So first we need to get the context about why do I make this talk. I'm living in the React ecosystem, which it's sometimes kind of a mess, if I can say that, because you have all the time new things, and things tend to break sometimes. And you have good practices, and so on and so on. And all that stuff leads to JavaScript fatigue. I think you are all familiar with JavaScript fatigue. Okay. Well, actually in Angular you are a bit like isolated from the from the React ecosystem, so you don't feel that, and it's very good for you. So, software engineer is all about solving problems. So, what I am trying to solve here? I would like my project to be easier to maintain, and all the projects I'm going to make in the future to be easier to maintain. So, JavaScript is very good to get started with programming and so on. But once you work on a big project with a lot of contributors and a lot of junior or seniors and so on, some fun goes away because you have all those immutability issues and side effects and all that stuff. It does hurt the maintainability of your project. And on the other hand, you have OCaml. I think you guys don't like so much OCaml, I guess. Can you maybe raise your hands? Who likes OCaml? Okay, so on the live stream, everybody raises his hand. It's crazy. Okay, so don't worry too much about that because ReasonML tends to only expose the good parts of OCaml. So typically it's ecosystem which is very stable and very mature. So this is pretty cool. I will get into more details about what this means. So first, I tried many things, like ESLint and Prettier. They are good tools, but to me, they should be included in the language, because otherwise you need to maintain them, and I think it's not necessary. Immutable.js is also super good, but it's sometimes tedious to use, and some existing JavaScript library may not play very well with it. So I think there's a better solution. And Flow and TypeScript are great. In the case of TypeScript, it's a bit too verbose to me because it's lacking a bit of type inference, to be honest. I will show you some demo, and you can then talk to me. You have also some alternative like Elm, which is kind of like Haskell. It's great, but if you want to interrupt with JavaScript, it has a very small API. They describe it as a hole in the side of your program. So it's very difficult to interact with actual JavaScript. So it's a blocker for me. Then you have ClojureScript. It's also great, but the blocker is that it uses Lispy syntax. So you have parentheses everywhere, which if you are not used to this, it's very difficult to get into it. So it's also a blocker for me. But then, and this is the reason I'm here, is for Reason. Reason is a new language built on top of OCaml, which has a JavaScript-friendly syntax. And I will show you some demo about that later. And it has basically everything that I ever looked for in a language. One example is code styling. So I would like to, please show me your hands if you already had this conversation with your colleagues about should we make this, now should we put here a semicolon or not? Like agree on code styling rules. Okay, this is good. Because has it solved any fundamental problem in your company? I mean, has it make your product better? Has it added new features? Anyway, if you use something like Go or Prettier, which is inspired by the thing in Reason called reformatter. So basically, Reason has this built in. So you don't need to worry about, should I make this a semicolon? Should I put here quotes? Or I don't know. And to be honest, I don't care so much about my syntax, because Reason does it for me. Also, it's super easy to get into JavaScript, to hook into JavaScript and interact with it. So you can use NPM, you can use Yarn, you can use Webpack, and it feels like we can just use the whole JavaScript ecosystem. In fact, you can even drop in raw JavaScript. Like this is an example where I say, I have this function, please don't look at it. And I just tell it, give it a string, and it returns a string. This is very good to get, experiments with your code, like prototype something. This is, of course, not recommended in production because it bypasses all the type system. But it's very cool to just drop in a JavaScript snippet. I love types. This is my main reason for software engineer. And it does save me so much time. And in Reason, and also in HawkML, but especially in Reason, the type system is static, of course, but it does infer your types, and this is so impressive. I will show you some code example later, but where you need to annotate your code, like in TypeScript, Reason can just guess it for you and get it right. So this is very cool. And it does remove the verbose part of TypeScript. One other advantage of the type system is it can act as a linter, which means that if you don't declare a variable, the type system will yell at you. If we don't expose a function and you call it, the compiler will also yell at you. There is some quote of, I don't know who it was, but he said that unit tests can only cover what you can think of, which means that if you have a function which takes an argument of a certain type, are you going to write a unit test to test if the argument will be of the certain type at runtime? I don't think so, and I think it's way more, it's too complicated. And in Reason, and even if you have a good type system, you wouldn't be even able to compile your code, because it has a wrong type. So in that case, a type system does remove a lot of cases in your test. So this is all cool, but nothing practical. So I will show you a bit of live coding, and I hope everything will be fine. So I will use the REPL, which is basically the same as in Node. It's called AirTop. You can download it on NPM. Just check out the website of Reason. Good. So very simple. I can declare a list of 3 things. This is like just JavaScript, right? And this is a very simple case, but it has already inferred that it was a list of int. Well, this is very easy because I passed just a list of int. You can also make a string, like in JavaScript. And then I can maybe create a function, like add, which takes 2 arguments, and just add them together. And this is pretty impressive already, because the add function, I never told the compiler that the add function would take 2 ints, sorry. But it has it got it already, and it's right, because in JavaScript you can add an int and a string. But I mean, there's no reason you could do this. And reason get the type right. And to prove that, I can add two numbers, and the math looks correct. And I can even try to add, like, I don't know, a string with an int. And obviously, the compiler will yell at me because it's obviously wrong. The add function does only take an int. So these are a very simple examples. But now, I will show you a bit of functional programming magic. Like, can you please raise your hand if you are familiar to currying or partial application? Okay, cool. So, for those who don't know, I will show you a quick example. So my add function takes two arguments. And here I will be calling my add function with only one argument. And this is going to returning me a new function which takes the second argument, still as argument. It's kind of like you can prepare a function to do a certain thing. I will show you a demo. Because once I hit enter, I have indeed the function which takes an int and returns an int. And so I can also call this. Like if you multiply 5 by, if you add 5 with 1, oh, I know. Sorry. So this one is correct, because if you add 5 with 1, it's 6. This is correct, and I didn't pass two arguments. I only passed one argument, but I already passed the first argument when I declare the add 5 function. So it does work. And now, imagine you have a list of something, like the 3 int I had before, and you just want to add 5 to it. Like this one. So this expression returns a function which takes a list of int and returns a list of int. And it will return a list of int plus 5. This is what I define in the lambda. So I can show you this, because if I pass here my list of int, it will indeed add 5 to each of one. But this is kind of ugly. I can make this look prettier. So there's one cool thing called the pipe operator. At some point it will be in JavaScript, but let's wait for that. So basically it will take my list and just pass it to the map function. And this is way clearer to me. And you can even chain the operation within the pipe. And so you remember that I had my add5 function, which takes an int and returns an int. So I can actually pass it there. So this was a bit magic, but I passed add5 instead of the lambda, right? And it does return the same thing. So this is a very cool application of partial application. I can show you another example if it's not clear to you. So I have a concat function which takes a left piece of string and a right piece of string and just concatenate them and return the result. Okay, so now I have a new function which takes only one string now, and it will automatically, oh, this is not good. It will automatically add the new string after my, okay. So it will add the new string, the right string, after my Sven is. Okay? So for example, I can define an array list of something. And I can pass it, so since it's a list, I need to map over it. But then I can pass it to my concat with Sven function, and it does indeed concat the two strings I've defined earlier. So there's actually no magic, it's just function, right? One other cool thing in Reason in most functional programming languages is everything is in expression, which means that if you have a variable with, I don't know, and you want to make a condition, and you want to get the result of this condition, in JavaScript, since it's a statement, there's no value which is returned. It's just imperative code like if something, do something. There's no return value. And in Reason, guess what? Oops. There is a return value because everything is an expression, so you can just write this. And this makes super sense to me because you can just like let this something, if this something, etc., etc. This is very cool. I can define types as well, like type person has an age of int, has a name which is a string. So I define a person, right? And now I will create some person. And if you look closely to the variable me, it's actually a person now. But I never said that me was a person, right? I just defined what a person is, and now I'm declaring a person. And the type system has inferred that me was actually a person. So this is pretty cool. You can get the name property. For example, if you do this, me.name, very classic. You can also create a new function which takes the person as argument, and I'm going to explicit the type and just return the name, right? Just make it simple. And yeah, I have my name. But now, I will create another person, and instead of declaring a new variable, I can just pass it in line. It's okay. And it works. I didn't even tell that age 21 and name EE was actually a person, but the compiler does infer it for you, which means that if I pass something that isn't of shape person, like this, it doesn't work because the function expects a person, not an age and a last name. So this means that instead of having to type to annotate everything, we can just define some type, like person, and then just pass objects, and the objects will will be the actual types. So this is pretty powerful. A very cool feature is if you use JavaScript and you used to have very long functions like this one, like many arguments, and you just care about the first one, you use to write this one. But if you change, when you code this, and if you change the order in this, your code maybe it wouldn't work because some variable you expect it to be a value will be undefined. So usually what you do is this. Is pass it an object. So, oops, yeah, never mind. Pass it an object and just destruct it. So you can just pass it an object and its name is pretty easy to use. But the issue is that even every time that you call this function, you need to create an object, and then you need to destructure this object. which it sounds like unnecessary processing. And in Reason, you can just create a function. And this is the syntax to give it a label, a name, on the argument. Then I can just return this. And when you call this, you can just name the argument. And call it with a name. And if you have a lot of arguments, which is not the case here, but if you have a lot of arguments, it's really clear because you can name them. So it's pretty powerful. I had many more examples, but I'm running short of time, sorry. So there's one cool concept in functional programming area, I think. I would like to think about an HTTP request with all the possible states, like has it started, is it an error, has it data, and so on. This is my first implementation in JavaScript. So you have a few booleans on top, and then you handle all the cases. And on the slide, I couldn't even fit all the cases. This is just a case where you have data. This is exactly the same code with Reason, with something called a type variant, which, if you look at the top of the file, I describe what a request state is. Like, it's maybe not started, or it's maybe loading. You have a success, and then you have data, etc., etc. And then I just have to switch over these cases, and know if it's not started, I can return something. If it has data, I can destructure the type and get the data out. And this way is pretty powerful, because now, let's say I don't care about any other case than the data. And if you look closely at the bottom of this slide, the compilers tell me that I don't handle all the cases, and in those cases, your code will fail at runtime. And this is not what you want. So this is called case exhaustiveness, and it's pretty cool. But as I said, I don't care about the other things. I just want my data. Oh, bad example. So you can provide a default case that says that even though it's not data, I just want to return a value. So the thing that you use to compile your Reason code to JavaScript is called bucket script. It's a compiler. It's known to be super fast, and it does emit super optimized code, which means that your app will load faster, and the bundle size will be very small. And this is out of the box in Reason. Reason is also what I call multi-platform, because JavaScript is multi-platform anyway. But since we can get to HOCaml can emit native code. That means that with the same code, you can emit JavaScript as well as native code. In some cases, so this is a game wrote in ReasonML. It's open source, you can check them out. It's written in ReasonML. It does target the web, so you can play in the web. It does target Android, so you can play it natively on Android. And this is pretty cool because on Android, you don't need to use Cordova and get the engine to be able to run JavaScript on this mobile. It's just native code. This is pretty cool. And one of the key concepts of the language as well is immutability. Like, the type checker can help you to cock some bad code like this one. If you declare a request state and you have a function which a colleague has created, and you call it, and this function like mess with your state, then you wouldn't be able to use your state anymore. And this, you can cache this in TypeScript if you don't have any implicit, because if it's any, you can mutate the object, it doesn't care. But in Reason, you don't have this. So this is code by default. You can't make this. One of the bad part of Reason, I have to say, it's maybe not super ready yet. Messenger.com, which is owned by Facebook, it's the messaging app by Facebook, has over the half of its code base written in Reason. and then several companies use it and so on. But to me, it has still a couple of years to go to get maturity and stuff. But if you want to use it now, there's a Discord channel. You can just connect to them and get help if needed. So that's it. Thanks a lot.